All right. Welcome to my channel. My name is 12 Gauge. This is my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative. I hope that you guys are having an awesome Martin Luther King Day. Happy Monday to all of you. Whoever's out there having to work on this Martin Luther King Day, I hope that you're not working too hard. And if you have the day off, I thank you for coming into the live and spending some time with 12. Today I wanted to talk about the prototyping the killer psychological aspect of behaviors. And if you're in as they say on these YouTube streets, if you're in the bushes, feel free to come in the chat and acknowledge some of the chatters because, most of the people that are in chat are kind people. They're not going to bite and they're not going to argue with you and they're not going to have those kind of ill will towards you. So it's always nice to be able to come in and have an open discussion as we go into this. I've done this live before, but I've never really looked at it the way that I've been kind of looking at it lately. I wrote down a psychological profile, I guess, on my own understanding, or I did kind of like an assessment on the things that are known or have been spoken on in the media. So I want to go ahead and start with that. And then we'll start with a video. Or why don't we start with the video first? That way you can kind of get an understanding of where we're going with this. I want to give credit to Chris McDonough in the interview room and some of his co-hosts. Um, he's going to outline a lot of this. And if you come into the chat, it's okay to agree to disagree. It's okay. This is not one of those chats that is trying to determine guilt or innocence, or even that, without a reasonable doubt that the right person has been in custody. So I want you to kind of look at it in a different light and let's have fun today. Let's not have a day of fighting or arguing or trying to get our point across that we're right and you're wrong and this and that. And let's not call each other names. Let's try to get along and try to take a look back and incorporate what we know so far. As Chris was identifying right here, you can see that most of us always already know this was the side of the home where more than likely the individual would have been parked. There is a vantage point here, there is an opening, but as we know more, it's a lot more clear up a ways from this area, and it's an easier vantage point to get into the house. So let's go ahead and hear what they got to say about this.
So this is behind the house. Just yesterday. I'm just going to watch it, if you can believe it. I have no idea. Anyway, okay, I'm going to film something back here, and then I'm going to come get the camera. Right. As you can see, I'm behind the house, and right there is the balcony to the back. This area is very interesting from a geographic standpoint. I mean, this is the back side of the house here, and it comes up right up this little embankment here, but then it goes up into a really high hill. And you have very difficult task because there's a chain link fence here as well for an individual to commit such a high profile situation and then flee up this area. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying I don't know if it's probable. Now, the point of entry, this would be very easy to get into this residence from this geographic route, from this part of the backyard. Actually, if you look down here as well, it's a little icy, so right down there, you'll see the screen laying. And these are some of the back rooms, bedrooms. It looks like the scene is frozen in time still. They have it shut down with an officer here.
Oh, okay. So that bottom room, I hit the wrong button here.
Very
Okay, I wanted to show you that because based on what I'm gonna talk about here in a second, it's gonna give you a visual of where we're going with what I'm talking about today. Hi everybody who's in the chat, Chick Crew, Rondi, Nina, Salty Sleuth Investigates, Aquarius. Okay, so I did a breakdown of this a while back, and can y'all see that okay, or do I need to make it bigger? Like I said, this is just a prototype. And I called it The Deception of a Killer. And I want you to kind of hang with me as I go through this because it's identifying traits that I identified through the research that I did, not only with the articles and news broadcasts and, researching documents and things like that. I put this together. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm not going to be able to be looking at the chat while I read this because it's in a Word document, and I'm going to have to kind of switch back and forth. So if for some reason something happens, if one of my mods would text me what's going on, and that way I can come back on the screen. So here we go. If you have any questions, be sure to put stars by your questions, and I will get to them at a breaking point. Okay. So I identified the deception of a killer. We know that this individual was bullied, and I'm going to go into the things that are in parentheses after I go through reading this. Okay. So I will show you how those go along with what I kind of assessed of the situation. Mostly by females. He had weight issues. Quiet mostly into his books. He had anger issues. Gaslight behaviors. Physical aggression. His friendship ended due to a headlock once he started to lose weight. He had heated debates in doctorate classes. Contrarian opinions. More disagreements with women. Koberger was warned about his interaction with women working and frequenting a bar in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. This guy made creepy comments. Keep an eye on him. Would get upset with them a little bit. I don't know what you're talking about. You totally have me confused. Intelligent but quiet. I didn't socialize with him because he had made anti-LGBTQ comments, and I am a queer individual. He was quiet and stared a lot, but after the murders, he seemed more willing to talk and hold a conversation. If he visited the Mad Greek, would there have been same behaviors there at the pub? Notes about the creepy guy. He wouldn't look away if you caught him staring, like he wanted you to notice that he was looking at you. He didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't say anything, just stared. He was just really quiet and really intense, staring. He made me uncomfortable. 2 knives, a Glock, handgun with 3 empty magazines, black face mask, black gloves, a black hat, green leafy substance in a plastic bag, a book with underlying on page 118, and the suspect's AT&T bill. The warrant said that the documents, vehicle paperwork, books, a prescription, a cell phone, laptop, and power cable were also collected. Bullied loner who overcame addiction was always as king questions. He always wanted to fight somebody. Drug abuse, more self-destructive. He really stayed secluded. Marijuana, heroin. I feel he was looking for validation. That's why he fell into that crowd. Sort of creep people out. Food regimen was very, very weird and went above and beyond being vegan. Behavioral problems and a sexist attitude towards women. Rude to women. Sexist attitude towards females he interacted with at school. Feisty, belligerent. Interested in psychology as a teen. He was interested in how people thought. Emotions and psychological traits influence decision making when committing a crime. Interested in serial killers and developing theories on what happened at crime scenes based on photos presented in class. April 2022, Kohberger interviewed for a job as a graduate research assistant at the Pullman, Washington Police Department. Observing and watching. Then starting November and December, he started just handing out hundreds and leaving very minimal comments. He seemed really nervous, the source said. He was narrating to himself everything that was happening. At one point, he was saying something to himself like, I'm fine, this is okay. Like he was reassuring himself that this whole thing wasn't awful. The defendant claimed he went to hike and run and to see the moon and the stars. Retrieved a school AED as fellow staffers and emergency personnel attended to their coworker. All children studied psychology. What is the connection or healing looking or seeking to be found? That he went into rehab. Described him as bright, focused, and nearly obsessive about criminology. Okay, so those were some words that were spoken about him in numerous articles, and we've heard these type of things being spoken about him. Whether they're true, whether they're not, it's still spoken. Sociopath, lack of empathy. They may not care about or understand other people's feelings. Irregard for right and wrong. They may not understand the difference between right and wrong and may ignore the rights and feelings of others. Manipulation. They may take advantage of others for their own personal gain. Impulsivity. They may act impulsive or fail to plan ahead. Aggression. They may be irritable or aggressive and may get into fights or physically assault others. Irresponsibility. They may fail to constantly work on or honor financial obligations. Lack of remorse. They may not feel remorse for bad things they do. A psychopath. Their behavior that conflicts with social norms. They disregard or violate the rights of others. Inability to distinguish between right and wrong. Difficulty with showing remorse or empathy. Tendency to lie often. Manipulate and hurt others. They have a recurring problem with the law. General disregard toward safety and responsibility. They express anger and arrogance on a regular basis. Their criminal record, he stole the phone. That's the only thing that we really know about as far as criminal record. I mean, even though he was stopped for a seatbelt ticket, he failed to attend the hearing on that, but he did pay the fine. Characteristics: white male with a height of 6 feet, weight of 185 pounds or more. Photograph shows bushy eyebrows. The psychological assessment of the crime scene and the subject's belongings: 2 knives, a Glock handgun with 3 empty magazines, black face mask, black gloves, a black hat, green leafy substance in a plastic bag, a book with underlining on page 118, and the suspect's AT&T bill. Accessibility: how easy it is to access their target is an important factor in deciding when and where to strike. Locks, security systems, cameras, these are all things taken into consideration. From what we've learned, the King Road house had none of these things. If they did, they weren't utilized at the time. So we know that the King Road resident didn't have a security system to our understanding. To our knowledge, there weren't any cameras at the residence, but there was cameras around the residence at other locations. And there were locks on the doors, but we don't know if the locks were utilized during the commission of the crime. Vulnerability: in this regard, the suspect weighs whether or not the target will be easy to dominate and overpower. Will they be home alone or somewhere secluded where no one will see or hear them? If we're talking about a location, is there something about it, say a broken lock, that would give them entrance to the premises? Did this individual know that the backslider was potentially damaged or compromised? Did he know that there was an easy way in and easy way out? Was he in the residence at any point in time to identify exactly the route of entrance and leaving? Was he able to decipher how many people were in the residence at the time of the commission of the crime? Did he think that there was only 4 due to the vehicles in the front, there only being 4 vehicles in the front? Did he overcompensate once he got in the residence and realized that there was more people in the residence? And did this override his commission of the crime? Did this allow him to exit without hurting the other 2 females? Desirability: if something about the victim or location appealed to the suspect or provide them to an opportunity to carry out personal goal or vendetta. Now let's discuss what aspects of the crime scene might give clues as to who or what was the target. So in the New Evil, the book that I was reading, it spoke of individuals that have a tendency to target somebody that they have some kind of attachment to, either in their childhood or throughout their life, that had been recreated as an obstacle that they either couldn't obtain or something that caused them immense pain or suffering. Let's take an example of an individual having a very domineering mother figure. So let's say this individual always wanted to harm the mother, but never got the opportunity or the right frame of mind to do so. So as they progressed in life, they found other obstacles that reminded them of the mother figure. And once they initially did kill or hurt somebody that reminded them of the mother figure, each time they did it, it was almost like killing the same person over and over and over again. So, the number of the victims. When law enforcement arrived, they found 4 victims and 2 survivors. 6 people were home at the time of the murders. Had there only been 1 or 2 victims, that might point to the attack being personal. 4 victims hint at the attack being more of a rampage. And there's a lot of theories out there, and I'm not trying to get into the theories of other people on this live, but I want you to think about this a little bit. I've been thinking about, we don't really understand how Ethan and Xana became a target. I've been thinking about this wholeheartedly, and it might be way out there. But I said on another live that DoorDash delivers groceries. And I've spoken to other people in that area that have told me that possibly the only thing open at the time was Winco, which is a grocery store chain. I'm just saying, what if somebody, either Ethan or Xana, did not order DoorDash for food from a restaurant, but they ordered groceries for the next day because they were supposed to have some kind of study group in the morning or something of that nature. I mean, maybe they were feeling ill because they, partied too much that night. Maybe they didn't have any kind of Tylenol or anything, and they didn't want to drive because they were too intoxicated to drive. So instead, let's order DoorDash. Let's order some groceries for in the morning. Well, once the groceries got there, of course, Xana would be upstairs and Ethan would probably go downstairs to gather the groceries. And as he brought them up, he could have been putting up the groceries and Xana coming in to help him as the killer was coming down the stairs. Attacks Ethan. Xana runs into the room and a fight ensues. And the rest we know about. And that's just a theory of mine. It doesn't mean that's what happened, but in my mind, that makes a lot more sense than the Jack in the Box because the Jack in the Box bag was for the whole world to see. Why would you leave a piece of evidence if you're trying to have a gag order and let people know bits and pieces of the crime? Why would you leave that on the sink for the whole world to see? So let's get to the location of the victims. Had all the victims been found in the same general vicinity, police might assume the crime was the result of confrontation. In this case, the suspect made an intentional journey from one floor to the next and from one end of the house to the other. This is especially notable because the suspect had the ability to remain upstairs until the house was still and swiftly exited through the kitchen and out the sliding back door. I struggle with the idea he came down the stairs and ran into Xana. Well, like I said, I don't believe he ran into Xana. I believe he ran into Ethan first. According to the PCA, Dylan heard someone say, "Someone's here," then got up, opened the door, and looked around, but didn't see anyone. Hearing only a female's voice of activity upstairs would not indicate someone other than the roommate was inside the residence. Something else had to have occurred for someone to make such a statement. So there's someone here. I mean, like I said, could they have been surprised by that individual and stated, "Hey, there's someone here," to the rest of the roommates? Possibly, possibly not. Where the crime occurred, it's not unusual for a killer to hunt their victim before carrying out the assault. That hunting ground is usually a space that falls within the suspect's comfort zone. So this generally states, if we're going with the 12 times that the suspected individual was there, that would have been comfort. That would have been somewhere that he was knowledgeable of. Because when you're surveying something that you're about to accomplish, especially if you're hunting, like let's say you're hunting for deer, you're going to prepare before you go to the deer stand. You're going to put out corn, you're going to do all this. Now, I'm not saying this is the same thing, but when you have a hunter mindset, you're only fixated on the end result, which is obtaining your target. So, you know, it definitely was a hunt. It definitely was a hunting situation, in my opinion. There are a couple of scenarios to explain this. The DoorDash driver had arrived, rang the doorbell, and one of the roommates called up downstairs to let someone know there was someone at the door. So there's someone here. Could one of the individuals, could it have been Ethan that said there's someone here? Could it have been Xana that said there's someone here? Ethan went downstairs to grab the DoorDash, came back upstairs, or maybe it was even Bethany that said there's someone here. Someone crept into Maddie's room and then startled Kaylee, or Maddie called out for help. I don't believe that happened because there's no mention of that in the PCA. I believe that they either succumbed to their wounds very quickly, based on what the PCA states, or either they had some kind of situation that rendered them from screaming out. I mean, like I've said, otherwise, whenever you're hit with a stab, not necessarily a slash, but a stab, instantly it knocks the air out of you most of the time. So if you're being assaulted this way, it's not going to be a quick assault. It's going to knock the air out of you. You're going to go into shock. You're probably going to your body's going to start going into fight or flight because it's going to want to fight. It's going to want to live. It's going to want to not die. So if these individuals were being attacked, I'm sure there was a fight going on. I don't believe that Maddie was as incapacitated as many people state. I believe that possibly she was intoxicated. I give her that, but she wasn't to the intoxication point that she was falling down, tripping, making a butt of herself. She was able to be coherent at the grub truck. So to be home and to say that she was just totally drunk and passed out and didn't know any of this was going on, I don't buy that at all. But that's just my opinion. Someone passed or went into the kitchen and noticed the slider door was open. Murphy was barking. The PCA stated that when Dylan thought it was Kaylee she heard, it also could have been Xana saying someone was in the house, since the download of her phone confirmed she was active on TikTok at 412. My question, in fact, is if it was Xana who believed a stranger was in the house, she would have just been a few feet from Dylan's bedroom door. Why didn't Dylan see her? To me, that says Xana wasn't or near the kitchen at the time and unlikely had made her way back to her bedroom. This speculation falls in line with the killing being more of a rampage and targeting just one victim. I mean, that would make sense, right? Wouldn't Dylan have seen Xana in the hallway? I mean, especially if she opened the door, she would have seen her in the kitchen or she would have seen her walking back to her room. But none of that's stated in the PCA. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. The state of the victims. Each was in a bedroom. We know two were in a bed, presumably asleep. All we know about Ethan and Xana is that Xana was found on the floor, and Ethan was also in the room. I really don't, I'm 50-50 on that. I know we've heard that he was possibly in the room, but I'm still 50-50 on that. They were not found in position to suggest that there was a confrontation or that the suspect was provoked in some way. I believe that they were ambushed, they were caught off guard because they were probably in the middle of doing whatever they were doing, and all of a sudden you see someone there that you don't recognize dressed all in black with a knife. I mean, it's going to take you a minute. They were in sorority and fraternities where they played a lot of pranks, a lot of jokes with knives. We have seen photos. Could they have thought maybe this was a prank? Maybe it was a joke and not really responded the way that they needed to respond if they felt that their life was in danger? No one knows, but I mean, it's just food for thought. Because I mean, I believe that if you thought honestly that your life was in danger, both of you would have ran after the killer instead of letting him run to you, in my opinion. So the fact that there was a fight, supposedly, as Steve Gonzalez stated, there was a hell of a fight going on downstairs. We still don't know if it was a hell of a fight or we don't know if it was a hell of an ambush, because if you're ambushed, everything after the fact, it is what it is. The lack of forced entry. James Fry said the backslider door was open when they arrived at the scene. This data point could indicate the suspect had access to the home or was let in. Also, consider the slider doors are alarmingly easy to lift off the track, and apparently there was no dowel in place securing the door. The suspect may not have needed to be let in. The backslider has always intrigued me to the point that You notice how loud that slider was when Kaylee opened the door when the police came that night? How loud it was, you know, and when they shut it. So if Kaylee was in her room at that point, wouldn't she have heard that door slide? Wouldn't she have heard somebody coming in unless she wasn't in her room, unless she was already in Maddie's room? And as I was thinking in another video, they had stated, I don't remember who, but I think it was Olivia that stated that Murphy ran from room to room and he sometimes slept with Maddie. So was Murphy in the room with Maddie? Is that why their doors may have been open so the door could come back and forth? So maybe that's why the doors weren't closed? I mean, you don't know. I don't know. But it's just a theory, just a theory. Um, so the slider door is just very intriguing that it would not shut after the fact. If the individual left out the slider, why didn't, what made the individual not close the slider on the way out? Why leave it open? What was the purpose for that? And I've always wondered if this crime did end at 423, between 423 and noon, there was nobody came into that home. If this home was as easily accessible as we've been told, there was nobody that came in and out of that home through the slider, through the front door, looking for people, wondering if people were partying. I mean, maybe somebody had some pot or maybe somebody had some pills or whatever, and you came over because you knew that there was more likely some of those things there. But nobody came over that night. Nobody that we know of. Nobody walked through that slider as it was open. Nobody walked to Xana's room. Nobody walked to Dylan's room, knocked on the door. Nobody walked upstairs to see Kaylee or Maddie's room. Nobody walked downstairs to knock on Bethany's door. Nobody. Nobody came. It was completely a ghost town that night. When they have us to believe that there were people in and out of that house all the time. And you say 12 gauge, well, people go to sleep. Not everybody goes to sleep. There's people that party all night, all into the morning. So you can't tell me that people don't party into the morning. And they might not even sleep depending on what they're on. You know what I mean? But if this house was easily accessible like that, there's no mention of that at all. There's no mention of anybody going in and out of that during those hours. I just don't know about that. I don't know. Because, I believe that, there could have been somebody that came by and wondered why the slider was open and just, looked around, maybe didn't see anybody and left. I'm not saying that it was nefarious. I'm just using logic here. I'm just using the logic that my brain thinks, There was nobody came by. But let's go to the next one, the brutality of the crime. We don't know much about the crime scene other than there was a great deal of blood. The track, considering the number of victims, that can also be indicative of a frenzied attack. The offender will select victims that are consistent with the important characteristics of people who are important to their offender. So once again, what role did these people play in his life? I don't believe that Xana and Ethan played a role in his life. I believe that the two upstairs were probably the targeted ones. I haven't decided which one yet, but I believe that Xana and Ethan were just at the wrong place at the wrong time, and the DoorDash were delivered at the wrong time. I mean, I always thought it was weird that the DoorDash arrived around 4 o'clock As the killer arrived at 4:07, 4:05. So let me go back up and talk about what I deciphered about this. And this is just based on my experience, studies, and everything else. I'm not necessarily a profiler, but you don't have to be a genius to put things together. You know what I mean? Um, take it if you will, leave it if you will. We've heard that he was bullied. This has to play with the emotional attachment with the individual, embarrassed. Embarrassment and bullied when you're young, it tend to give you a self-esteem issue. It seemed to give you a more aggressive tendency to people if you don't trust them. Mostly by females, and this was a genre. It's like it didn't say he was bullied just strictly by males. It said mostly by females. So if females are bullying you, and we don't know the extent of the bullying. We don't know if he just got called names, if he was actually, they did pranks, any of this stuff. We don't know. Supposedly he had weight issues, which dabble into the self-esteem realm, self-image, isolative. So think about these things. If you're battling with these at a young age, weight issues are a big deal among people. Like image is a big deal. So if you're being made fun of, and supposedly somebody said he was over 300 pounds the other day in a live that I saw. I don't know if that's been confirmed or not, but if he was, then he was a pretty big guy. So people are more apt to make fun of and bully what they don't understand. So possibly his self-esteem was being tarred because of his self-image, and that caused him to isolate. He he was supposedly quiet, mostly into his books. This suspects a coping mechanism, like at least in the books, I'm in charge, I'm in control of the outcome because even though I'm reading it, I don't have anybody else directing me like the book is. I'm having my own kind of quiet time. Anger issues, emotional coping skills. Anger is a big coping skills when it comes to any kind of emotional distress, whether it be you feeling chastised or talked down to, or possibly, not made feel like you're a part of something, but apart from. That is one of the social components of life is being a part of, not apart from. We all want to fit in. And you say, well, maybe he didn't want to fit in. Well, maybe in one hand and maybe in the other. You know what I mean? Like, it is a social component. Most of the time, individuals do want to be a part of, even if they say they don't. Even if they say they want to be unique and all this other stuff, most of the time we want to be a part of the social dynamic. We don't want to be ostracized. We don't want to be made fun of. We don't want to be, feeling like we don't deserve to be around certain areas. Gaslight behaviors, retaliation. And now we're getting into the retaliative part, the progression. Physically aggressive, retaliation. Smash things, punch a wall, not wanting to hurt humans, but to hurt himself or inanimate objects. So think about this a little bit. If you don't view people as being human and they're just an object to you, you're not going to have an emotional attachment when you're hurting them. And there are individuals that can hurt human beings without a conscience, without any kind of stop button from hurting them, including killing them, because they've been able to compartmentalize these individuals as not human, but just as an object to either destroy or eliminate or to control. So to say that he wouldn't have hurt anybody, he wouldn't have been able to kill anybody. We all have that capacity if we're pushed at the right time, at the right place. Friendship ended due to a headlock. When he started to lose weight, we heard that, he was becoming the bully. He had a change of behavior. His behavior was escalating due to the point that, he was kind of letting all those years of people hurting him, as we know, hurt people hurt people. So what is the capability of that? Do you agree with that or do you not agree with that? So let me see. Heated debates in doctorate classes, emotional presentation, like you want to make sure that at this point he possibly wanted to make sure that people saw him not as weak, not as bullied, but by this point he honestly had the education to be equal or in his mind more superior than most people. So whenever you get into a debate, you don't just stop. You want to annihilate that person by letting them know that you're smarter than them. Here we go with more disagreements with women. Genre, sexuality. Were they the easier target? Koberger was warned about his interactions with women working and frequenting a bar in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Was this possibly sexuality? What is viewed as creepy? You know, I was watching a couple gym videos the other day and it kind of opened my eyes on some things. You know, most people use these words that are meant to destroy or to humiliate. They use them as the first word they choose. So to be used in a word setting where you're creepy, you're weird, you're kind of, not, you're socially awkward. By whose standards? Like those waitresses could have viewed him as creepy. What does creepy people do? I mean, there's some people in the chat who I could view as creepy based on what they say, how they present themselves, some of their lingo, some of the things that I see on their channels or things like that. I could view that as creepy. But does that make them creepy just because I view that as creepy? Not necessarily. This guy make creepy comments. Keep an eye on him. Drinks one or two and gets comfortable. What kind of creepy comments were made? And once again, what do you view as being creepy? What kind of creepy comments what would a creepy comment be to you? It's like it's okay if an individual who you approve of says something vile to you or does something to you, then it's okay. But if somebody that you're not attracted to or that you don't see um, as equal to you, then all of a sudden they're viewed as creepy. You know, I don't get that, and I don't know if y'all understand that in the chat as well. I don't know if you have an understanding of your understanding of what creepy means. Please type it in the chat. You know, because it's a very slippery slope there. It really is. Let's try to remember to keep the chat on to what I'm discussing here, because otherwise I'm just talking to myself and you guys are just, ignoring what I'm talking about and I'm just wasting my time. So if you could answer that question for me, what creepy would mean to you as a belief system. So that would entail placing this individual in a realm that is not pleasurable. So what would creepy mean in this restaurant where these females would put him on a list and say he's making creepy comments, keep an eye on him. After one or two drinks, he gets comfortable. What would some of those creepy comments be potentially? I'm asking the chat. I'm not saying that he made these comments. I'm not trying to paint him as a creepy person. I'm just trying to understand what could be perceived as a creepy comment after one or two drinks. Would get upset with them a little bit. The emotion, the loss of control. You know, I don't know very many people that wouldn't get upset with somebody perceiving them as being something that maybe they didn't see themselves being. Maybe creepy was the last thing that Koberger ever saw him being, was a creepy person. Maybe he saw himself as an overcomer, as an overachiever, as somebody who, you know, was equal to other people. And in all essence, he was, because nobody's greater or less than anybody else, no matter what your perception says. So the emotion where he would get upset with the loss of control, it's easy to understand because who wouldn't get upset? I don't know what you're talking about. You totally have me confused. Well, maybe he didn't really understand what the manager was talking about, or maybe this was his grandiosity lying to preserve his self-image. Maybe once again he was lying and had that narcissistic grandiosity to preserve his self-image. Maybe he was saying, well, you know what? I don't know what you're talking about. You have me confused with somebody else. Well, no, we have you on this list. They have you labeled as creepy guy. I don't have a clue what you're talking about. It's easy to be two-sided on this. Intelligent but quiet. His inner fights with emotional attachment or fears. There's a lot of intelligent people that are quiet. And there's a lot of intelligent people that and quiet that we've seen have become serial killers. I wish we knew without a reasonable doubt which one he fits in. And I hope one day we really do find out if he had some of these traits and these were some of the trait that ultimately drove him to do what he did, or maybe not. I didn't socialize with him because he had made anti-LGBTQ comments, and I'm a queer individual. Deflection of his own insecurities, sexuality. Was he fighting his own image? Once again, if we're looking at the psychology of this and the psychological aspect, and we're not looking at the statement as being just a statement, what could this be where he would make these anti-LGBTQ comments toward that community and think it was okay? You know, was he feeling himself as superior? Was he feeling himself as a way of getting back at somebody who may have influenced a comment, maybe perceived that he was in that community? You know, we don't know, but what could it have been? He was quiet and stared a lot, but after the murders, he seemed more willing to talk and hold a conversation. Well, after the murders, everybody was a little more talkative. Willing to hold a conversation, not so much, but they wanted you to hear what they had to say. Could he have found his new project, not necessarily a connection to it? Was this a new project to take on to really solve the crime? Was he trying to solve the crime just like every other YouTuber on the platform? Was he trying to be the one who was able to decipher the evidence? Is this what brought him into the limelight? Is this what brought him into a suspect status? Was he praying? Was he praying just a little too much? If he visited the Mad Greek, wouldn't there have been the same behaviors there at the pub? Notes about the creepy guy? I believe that everywhere you go, there you are. So if I'm acting this way at one place, I would not, it would not be far-fetched that he would not have the same behavior somewhere else, especially if he was indicative of not liking females or having that superioristic mentality over females. Why wouldn't he go from one restaurant to the next and have the same type of behaviors? Was there any of this documented at the Mad Greek? Was he even there? Was he ever there? You know, it's just interesting to me that if you go to one place and they single you out and they even put you in a registry, so to speak, and call you creepy, and after one or two drinks you get comfortable with the women. I know the Mad Greek probably didn't serve alcohol, but it didn't mean that Brian didn't, drink a couple before he went there. People's mentality is so concrete at times where they fail to put other aspects into it rather than what they have at the moment. So, you know, if let's say for the sake of conversation, let's say he did go to the Mad Greek. He went to the Mad Greek, he saw Maddie, he saw Xana, potentially saw Kaylee, or some other female that he may have been attracted to. Or maybe he wasn't attracted to any of them. Maybe he was just, for the lack of a better word, triggered, you know? Maybe he was just triggered upon an urge that was growing inside of him. Because not every place you go, you're looking for a victim. You don't go to the grocery store to look for a victim unless you have pushed past the point of normalcy. You know, you don't go to these places to look for a victim. You don't go into, you know, but I'm just saying that potentially your behaviors don't change. They're not far off. If you act a certain way somewhere, you're going to act a certain way in another place as well. If you're rude to your servers in one place, as you go to another place and you have a reenactment and you view that these servers are wronging you, chances are you're going to be rude to them as well. Is it because you're a rude person or is it because of the service you're receiving? Which one is it? And that's what we have to look at, is to be thinking outside the box rather than just kind of pigeonholing somebody into this place where they might fit or they might not fit. He wouldn't look away if you caught him staring, like he wanted you to notice that he was looking at you. He didn't smile, he didn't nod, didn't say anything, just stared. Control, intimidation, self esteem, or could it be nothing at all? If I'm looking at it deeper than the surface, I'm looking at possible control, possible intimidation, or possible self esteem issues. Like if you're staring at somebody, and there's a difference between a general glance and just full out staring at them and not breaking that eyesight. You know, you got to ask yourself, what this person thinking? Are they even looking at me? Are they looking behind me? Are they looking at the TV above me? What are they looking at? And if you really can tell they're looking at you, you have to ask yourself, what are they thinking about? Are they in deep thought? They're just looking my way, or are they potentially sizing me up? He was just really quiet, really intense, staring. He made me uncomfortable, definitely noticeable. boundaries, control, and lack of empathy. He was really quiet, really intense. Another staring comment. You know, you can be made uncomfortable in a lot of different ways. Some people don't like to be touched. Some people don't like to be stared at. Some people don't like to have quiet people around them. How are we supposed to know what your comfort or what you're not comfortable with? And then we go down to what was found at his house. So far, give me a little insight on what you feel about what I've read to you so far. Do you believe that possibly, if you're looking at these things deeper than the surface, you're going to really find what you're looking for? So I believe working with people for as many years as I have, people are pretty predictable. There's not much about a person that you can't really get if you really pay attention. And most of the time, what they give you is what it is. There's no question in it. There's no there's no placating if somebody is weird, somebody's creepy, if somebody is antisocial, if somebody is pro-social. There's no confusing that, you know? So whenever you go looking into things like this, I ask you to take that into account. Not because I want the person to be guilty, not because I want the person to be innocent, but I look at things on a total different level on my channel rather than just getting into the, well, was it the White Elantra 11 to 13? Was it Banfield? Was it Linda Lane? Was it all these things? No, I don't. You know, I started with those things when I started with my channel. But over time, I'm looking at it in a more analytical way where you're trying to get into the psyche of the individual and trying to decipher the patterns because everything is based on pattern. We all have a pattern. You know, how many people do you know that today's Monday? I keep thinking it's Saturday, but on Saturdays, you can find them at the grocery stores, you can find them at Home Depot, you can find them at Lowe's, you can find them at Michael's at an arts and crafts store, or you can find them yard selling, you can find them doing all these things, or cleaning the yard, doing laundry, you know, cleaning the house, whatever, because we're very routine like. There's not that much difference in our lives compared to the person next door. You can usually determine what somebody's going to do. They're usually doing the same thing every Saturday. Every Sunday, they're usually doing the same thing if they have a fixed schedule. By Monday morning, you usually know most people are gone to work from 8 to 5 or 10 to 6 or 2 to 10 or whatever, but most people are gone to work at that time. So you can tell, well, these people are going to be gone from their homes. So what I'm trying to tell you is we learn people's patterns and we adapt our own to try to incorporate anything that we want achieved. So if we want to hurt somebody, we're going to learn somebody's patterns where we know when they're the most vulnerable, when there's the least amount of chance that we're going to get caught if it goes to the extreme. Where most of the time, if you're not thinking about these crimes way in advance, most of these crimes are very sloppy. They have only thought of, well, I want to kill that person. And when they kill them, they don't know how to dispose of them. They think I'm going to burn them, I'm going to cut them up, I'm going to do this, I'm going to stuff them in a suitcase, all these things, but they're very messy. And when police look at this, whenever detectives and investigators and forensics and all these people that are involved in the investigation look at this aspect, and they go into their mindset of thinking, well, this person was obviously rushed whenever they did this. What caused the individual not to kill the other two people? If there were only footprints left in the rooms, that determined that the murders happened in the rooms. If there was not a lot of blood in the hallway or in the kitchen or even outside in the yard, then that determined that the killer probably took the initiative to conceal the trace of blood from the home to the yard to the vehicle. I mean, it's not rocket science, but many people are so caught up in their mindset where they're on autopilot, they don't think about these things. They don't think the process through. That's why whenever you say, well, there wasn't a lot of blood, or there couldn't have been a lot of blood, people are willing to fight you over that statement because in their mind there had to be a lot of blood. Well, there's not going to be a lot of blood if the heart isn't pumping at that point. The only the only way that the blood is going to be radiating is if the heart is still beating. Most of the stab wounds, if they're deep enough or they possibly go through the body, they're going to accumulate under the surface. And possibly if they go through the body, the knife goes through the body, it's going to bleed into whatever they're laying on, or if they're on the floor, it's going to coagulate and, you know, go downhill like what we saw in the second floor where it went out the side of the house. So, you know, if we're really looking all this stuff, if we're looking at it through a different eye, through a different mindset, we're going to really see that this was a very violent crime, that it was very meticulous. I think it was very meticulous because it shows if the crime is sloppy, that tells you that this person really didn't think the crime out. It could have been a thrill kill, it could have been a spree killer, it could have been, you know, crime of passion, anything like that. But if there's hardly any evidence left, such as the bloody footprints left out the door or anything like that, then it was planned. And think about it. As much as people don't want to believe it, the person that they have in custody, wouldn't he have had the knowledge to get away with disposing of evidence? Yes or no? I mean, I just want you to say yes or no. Would he not, more often than not, than anybody that we've put under the microscope, Jack D, all those people, would the person that's in custody right now not have more ample knowledge in how to get rid of evidence at a crime scene? So at the process of elimination, you ask yourself, well, it couldn't have been Dylan. How could she know how to get rid of blood in 8 hours? How could they have gotten rid of the blood, the footprints, the fingerprints, all this stuff that could have been destroyed in those 8 hours is what people want to think. How could those roommates have been knowledgeable enough to get rid of all that evidence? I mean, if you really think about this crime and you think about it logically, it was fast, it was concise, and it was focus driven. This individual knew what they were going into that house for. They were possibly going in for two, and maybe they enjoyed the two so much they wanted more. Saw two more and thought, you know, I need to get out of here. I need to get out of here. Because I can tell you, if he saw Dylan, she wouldn't be alive today. She was in his line of sight. He was hunting. She wouldn't be here today. If he knew Bethany was downstairs, if he felt that he still had the element of surprise, she wouldn't be here today. So I'm just telling you that, this is my theory on it. And whether you believe it or whether you don't, or whether you think I'm full of crap, that's fine. I believe that this individual that did this was very meticulous, very calculated. And had he not gotten caught, there'd be more murders by this point, 2 years later. And whether he's innocent or whether he's guilty, we will find that out. Once we get through these processes of suppression hearings and all these things that are, part of the procedural aspect of it, once we get through all this, we'll know at the trial. We'll all know. But at this point, it is just about what we have and what we have and what we have and what we talk about. But I thank you so much for being here. I'm not going to play this video. It's too long and I'm not really feeling like going any longer than this. I thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the comments. I really wasn't able to read any of them. So thank you guys for your comments. And if you were asking me questions, I apologize. I will go back and watch the chat. And I will answer them in the comments. Hope y'all have a wonderful day. My name is 12 Gauge and Maestro, cue that